Now, is this something that you actually want me to do? I just assumed that you guys would like a post-game discussion. I'm not sure. So you tell me, please. Is this something that you would want me to go through or not? Today's session was obviously very chaotic and confusing for the players, I think, as well as for you as viewers. But all will be revealed in due course. Give me the scoop on the clacks, says Pikmin Biomaster. Sounds cool. And yes, very much so. Okie-dokes, fantastic. All right. So if we look at today's show, the plan was that the characters, and I mustn't look over here. I'm just going to line some stuff up so I can show you what I was thinking. Oh, I closed the window. Okay. So the plan was to introduce the characters to the notion that the world has been fractured. I don't think that's come across very well. I need to develop that some more, and I'm going to do that in the next couple episodes because I feel that there is a lot of interesting information that the players are starting to get to, but they need more of it. So that will be a journey that I will take them on. I'm opening up behind me the World Anvil template that I made. So here is the little blurb that I wrote. It's called The Clack Clack at the Door, and the idea was that, or the clack clack door, I forgot to write at the. Escaping from one hell and landing in another, our party is forced together by the nature of their abilities to shift through the rifts. They are asked to help the castle of Tungate Keep by calling for reinforcements from the nearby city of Feldoon. They must journey through a swamp to get to Feldoon. Along the way, they find a ruined temple, blah, blah, blah. And there's a little bit of a betrayal. So it's a very small adventure. It's a very basic beginning adventure. And if you look at our timing, a normal session might be 4 hours long or so. And so we're 2 hours in. They've now decided to take the journey out onto that swamp. So I think that is staying on course pretty much with what we wanted. Now, what I then did, sticking together is the only way to win, was the theme that I was talking about. It's a discovery kind of mission. It's part of the master plot. It's going to reveal a whole bunch of stuff. The main adversary is a villain that we're meeting. That's the Clacks, which are coming in. What do we expect? Combat, sneaking, running, fear, and terror. I think I've kind of got that. What the players must learn is how to use the rough stones. Now, they don't know that they call the rough stones, and neither do you. So that's a bit of an insight that others will not have. So actually, if I go to preview, it might be easier for you to see. So let's open up that preview. So what must the players learn? How to use the rough stones. The Clack Clack Door are dangerous, and the main purpose of the Clack Clack Door hive. Now, that they have not yet learnt, the main purpose of the Clack Clack Door hive. That will come in later on in the adventure. You see that we've got Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Act 1 introduce the goal, which is to meet Falor on the ship under attack. I had there by a kraken. That was my original plan. Then the players sent me through where they thought their characters would start in terms of their backstories that they had written, which worked out to be better. So then was Henloch Rach, the paladin that was on the ship trying to save Falor. Then we had Flint, who was being hunted by those gaslighters, and Warren, who was being trained by Delu, the Dragon of Courage. Not the Dragon of Courage, I throw that name in. Introduction to the Clack Clack, who are attacking Tungay Keep, and the idea that there are these massive armies, and into the situation that they're on all four sides except for the one side. So that's how far we've got. Here's the setup journey. Duke Sandast begs the shifters to head to the city of Feldoon to get reinforcements. The swamp is the site of an ancient temple and shouldn't pose too much of an issue. He has a scout to send with them, Huthan. Huthan has fallen away. I didn't need Huthan to get them to the swamp because I realized that A, we were running out of time, so I don't need the swamp itself to be too much of an impedance to their journey. I don't need that to happen. So I don't need the satyr to lead them through. When they get there, they arrive at the lost temple of Elysii, the goddess of light, purity, and safety. The temple is overrun with refugees hiding from the Clack Clack Door. They are starving and need food, and there are also bandits who attack anyone who leaves. there is a reason for this, and I'm going to show it to you now, even though it really is a big spoiler, I suppose. And then, of course, we've got this false ending, which I'm not going to go into too much now because that's going to come in the next couple of shows, and that'll take us away. So what I'm going to now try and do is see if I can move this over and bring it in. I don't know if I can. Give me a second here. So what the idea with the clack clack door are, the idea of them being this big bad monster, they definitely are. And the premise that I have for the journey that the characters are on is that they're going to start by feeling as if they are overpowered, as if there's too much for them to fight against, there's too much for them to work against. And these monsters are very big and very dangerous. So the Clack Clack Door are actually very big and very dangerous. They've got very high armor classes. They have a lot of hit points. They are quite dangerous, and they deal a lot of damage, as we saw there. Now, I see that Mama D Joy there says, I just want to know if the first keep will survive the firebug. Well, that's something to bear in mind. It is something to bear in mind. And Tungay Keep, in this particular case, those of you who've watched my map series before, you'll notice this is not the actual Tungay Keep. This is a different castle design. Now, this particular castle design is just a generic castle that I made. And so that's something to bear in mind. I don't think we're going to see Tungay Keep again, at least not unless the shifters come back here. Now, that is something that I added in completely on the fly. It was not planned. It was a gap that I had, and I hadn't yet resolved in my head how to give it to the players. When you've got these stones, these rough stones, those I've worked out. You place the rough stones, 6 of them in a circle, they create a portal, and it is a random portal somewhere, depending on the alignment of the stones. So that starts to speak to things like Stargate, where you're dialing home your DHD device. It does start to bring in those ideas. But it's also a temporal thing, so it's the future and the past depending on how you place those stones. So that's all stuff that's going to come through. And I didn't want to have the first session where the characters are given the stones and it's like, now if you place them here, this is what happens. If you do this, this is what happens. So I wanted them to discover it in a certain way, but I couldn't figure out exactly how to do it. But then the idea of Warren's backstory, where he's being raised to be this paladin of this god, and he's being trained by this god, it was a bit of a fanciful backstory, but I thought, you know what, let's run with it, let's go with it, and let's try and work this out. So there, Mama D Joy, what you say, was the time loop planned, or did you improv that? I hope that it didn't come across as something that wasn't planned, but that it came across as something that was planned. The stones, I have always planned for the rough stones to allow the characters to go into the past and to go into the future. That's part of the idea of the show, part of the idea of the setting as well. The fact that they were going to go into this time loop for Freddy to see, or for Warren anyway, to see his future self, I thought fitted quite nicely with the idea that Freddy had to go and find himself. That was something that he brought into the game. He mentioned it at the beginning. Oh, I need to find myself and whatever. So I was like, okay, well, here you are in the future. You've come back and you've done this thing. So that is the thought that came through my mind, or that was in my mind anyway. I can actually take this out of my head. That was in my mind when I came up with that idea. On the fly there. So if you're watching this on YouTube, by the way, it is live every Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that's where you can actually ask me questions live, as some people have done here. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that have come through and see what's going on here. A teleportation where it's about the symbols, says Eric. With the time thing, I'm left wondering if they're actually different times or if they're different dimensions that are almost exactly the same. Well, yes, Eric, that's a good question. And as far as I'm concerned, personally, I don't think that time travel is something that is, I don't want to say possible, but I like the idea that you don't go back in time, you go to well, You go to a different time in a different dimension, and things then propagate forward, automatically changing by you being there. So is this the exact same universe that they were in, and then they went back in time, or is it a slightly different one? Well, it is slightly different, because when they now encountered Warren again, he wasn't wearing the heavy plate mail, he was wearing the shiny armor. He didn't have the book with him anymore, because he couldn't have, because they did, because of temporal paradox. Oh my gosh, it gets into that space where eventually you kind of go, oh, it's Star Trek time mechanics. It just works. Accept it and move on. So what we're going to discover, and this is something that I'm going to try and feed in later on, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it as a guide for the players, is that as they discover other shifters, those shifters are going to give them a little bit of extra insight, because moving around, moving between the different dimensions, being able to travel backwards and forwards in time, so to speak, is an incredibly powerful weapon. And if they can do that frequently, it can break the campaign. So, for example, here, where they went back in time and then they tried to change the course of the events, Flint tried to save the warriors from that burning fire, and then tried to engage the clack again, and we had that wonderful D20 roll exactly the same as before. That was amazing in terms of coincidence, but it kind of worked out. However, there needs to be a restriction. So what they're going to find is they can only go back to this exact time with that alignment, and by changing or tweaking the stones, they can't necessarily go back to the same world and the same past that, or time or present that so in other words, they can't jump in their same timeline, let's put it that way. So some more questions that are coming through. Question, are those stones always going to be from the ashes of a shifter? So no, I needed to get rid of the shifter. I needed to, whoever was giving them the stones, I needed them to go away very quickly, because if they have all of this knowledge, they can just give it directly to the players, and I don't like that. I don't feel that the players should just get this dump block of information. Okay, this is how the stones work. So I had him turn to dust for absolutely no reason. I have no reason in my head currently why he turned to dust. Later on, because I have seeded it, I will come back to it, is later on they're going to discover, perhaps in some far distant adventure, Warren is this old man and he has been hit by this blast of disintegration, and he steps back into a portal that happens to take him back to this Tungay keep so he can give the stones to himself. I don't know. We're going to figure that out. We're going to figure out how to do this later on. I just needed them to get the stones, the rough stones. And I didn't want to have this old lady just give them stones as is. I wasn't anticipating them using them straight away. That was a bit of a surprise, and I realize now I made the mistake by having the Duke and everyone say, oh, well, you're shifters, you can move around, by encouraging them to try and do that. So when they burnt through their first 12, basically to just go back in a time loop, that was a bit of an expensive cost, in my opinion, to then leave them with only 6. Now, they can get more of these rough stones. They will find that they jump to dimensions where there are more available. It's just obsidian stone that's been carved in a specific way. They'll learn how to carve those stones eventually. They'll meet some shifter on some desolate dimension where they can find them and engage with them and the like, and that's fantastic. But that'll be part of the journey. So then they will be able to make more. But the stones always get consumed, and those portals only last for 1d6 rounds. So when they create the portal, they have 1d6 rounds in order to enter that portal. After that time, the portal seals shut and the stones are used. So they do run the risk of running out of stones quite quickly. Another question is, does that mean that they now have 2 sets of those stones since you have that view of time travel shifting? Well, yes and no, and maybe and possibly. This whole idea of the book, and this is something also that I added in on the fly, because I realized that the players might need this, and it might be an artifact that's really useful for them in the long term. And by giving it to them now, it gives them, I suppose, it's something to work with. It gives them something to work towards. It does allow them to hold up the book when they meet other shifters, and it gives them a bit of street cred. that book, those pages will become active when they arrive on the world that book is, that particular page is describing. So the page is dimensionally linked, so to speak. So when they look at the page and they see all this gibberish, it's because that particular page is not in this dimension. That page is in another dimension, but they're sort of seeing the mirroring artifacts of it and the like. So when they get to another dimension, if they look through the pages, they'll get a brief write-up of that dimension, if the shifter has been to that world. And hopefully they'll start to make their own notes as well to build up a kind of legacy that, oh, well, you know, we've been here and this is the shape the stones took, or the stones we discovered here. So there are a lot of questions that have been seeded. And because it's a first episode, or a first session, if you like, those stories, those ideas, even though I'm telling them to you now, they might change as we go along and we discover more interesting, more exciting solutions rather than those that have just been thrown down. All I knew is that I wanted the rough stones to allow portals to be created. They don't last for a very long time. They dissolve at the end of it, so they are a consumable, and that's going to drive the characters to try and find more of these stones. It's also going to try and drive them to understand how these stones work. So that's the kind of the journey that we're going on. Now, I see another question's come through. I like that idea. The book is finite, though. So does that mean that there are a number of worlds are finite as well? Well, I think the bottom line in terms of that kind of question is that the pages are finite. Yes, the book only, let's say, has 100 pages. But the shifter who owned the book might not have visited more worlds than that. So some of those pages might be blank as well. And who knows how many worlds there are. So when you get to the point of infinity, you go, well, you would need an infinitely large book to write down all of the infinitely large numbers of universes that exist out there. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that one can go into when you look at time travel, but one of the theories that I like the most is that at every opportunity there's always a splitting. So whenever there's a decision to be made on the quantum scale, and this might be a bit too much thought process, but it's my thought process. The one theory is that whenever there's an option of up or down, we get a split in the universe. So then we have all of these parallel dimensions running next to each other. But when there's a parallel dimension that is so similar to the other one, because it's only 1 or 2 or 50 billion yes or no's different, they merge together and collapse in onto themselves. So you have these splitting up of the universes, but when they are similar enough to each other that they are almost the same, they actually just coalesce into one, and then they continue to split from there. So it's a branching, but it's a coming back, it's a branching, it's coming back. So it's not necessarily infinite, it's the potential of infinity, but it keeps coming back in on itself, so it kind of keeps itself constrained, if that makes sense. Excuse me. Now, of course, this flu is not helping me. I hate not being able to do this. So, there we go. I'm just looking here at another comment from Randy Gamble that's come through. I was impressed with the idea of creating a story first and making the mechanics fit the story later, but hearing you talk about it live lends an even greater understanding of the concept. That's fantastic. I'm glad that it's doing that for you. You've always done it the other way around. Find something neat in the mechanics and then base a story around that, but it opens up possibilities to so much more if the story comes first. Absolutely. Excuse me for just 1 second. And hopefully I muted the right mic there. So there we go. There are lots of options that we can explore, and I think for a first session, the guys got into it quite quickly. They had to make a few concessions here and there. I like the way that Michael sort of paused for a moment and said, all right, well, let's just introduce who the hell we are to each other first, and then move forward, which I appreciate. And I think that just comes through from him being a GM as well as a player, as well as a viewer. And I want to thank you all for participating in this very first live Twitch stream show, for giving us your thoughts and your comments. If you have any suggestions on how we can improve them, please let us know here or join us on Discord. All of the links are down below. I'm going to end off this stream now because I believe my flu is starting to demand its retribution for being at bay for so long. But again, thank you for being part of this, and my regular Twitch stream on on Fridays, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time will happen this week. I am back on track, and so I wish you and yours and everybody else who's around very good night, good afternoon, good day, and until next time, happy gaming.